Hello and welcome to Crosstalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. American presidential election politics is a cross between a talent show and a beauty contest. Being smart and coherent does not necessarily pay dividends. Case in point, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. Both are frontrunners of their parties. Trump is idiosyncratic and raw. Clinton, the ultimate establishment insider. Is this a choice or merely bad theater? To Crosstalk the American presidential election, I'm joined by my guest, Lionel in New York. He is a legal analyst and news decoder at lionelmedia.com. Also in New York, we have Paul Kuhn. He is an analyst and author of the political novel, What Makes It Worthy. All right, gentlemen, Crosstalk rules are in effect. That means you can jump in anytime you want, and I very much encourage you. David, if I can go to you first here. First, explain to my international audience, our international audience, the phenomenon known as the Donald, or Donald Trump. Go ahead.
You know, Donald Trump can be understood as a combination of right nationalist candidates like Le Pen in France and really the TV-friendly candidate that has for a long time thrived in American politics. What we have here is a candidate that is embodying the trends that we're seeing across Western democracies, which are strong, conservative, candidates who are response partly to ISIS, partly to other immigration issues, etc. But we also have someone who embodies what has long been a problem of American primaries, which is that, frankly, this is TV revolutionized the campaign, and Donald Trump is the ultimate TV candidate.
Yeah. Lionel, a lot of people ask me, and I'd like to know what David's opinion also is on this, is that he seems like a Ronald Reagan type figure, because he seems to, for better or worse, he's revolutionizing the GOP. The Republican Party is going through convulsions right now, and it's the establishment that is openly wanting to derail him. I mean, they want to derail their own frontrunner, Donald Trump, if you like him or not. He's absolutely right that the more people are coming out to vote for him than in other Republican primaries. I mean, he has a message here. It's resonating, and the establishment is terrified of him. And we can talk a little bit about Bernie Sanders as well. Go ahead, Lionel.
Well, a couple of things here. For those who don't know, Donald Trump initially was considered by a lot of people a buffoon, a man who was known more for his elaborate comb-over, who had strange hair, who was a billionaire, who was basically a game show host, a carnival barker, somebody who was involved in casinos and the like. The perennial candidate. He was laughed at. He was mocked. They said there's no way he's going to get anywhere. I truly believe in my heart of hearts that Donald Trump is the most surprised by how well he's doing. He came out on day one and attacked Mexicans. He said he's going to build a wall.
David,
his whole platform was
Lionel, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. David, let me go back to you, because Lionel, has hit a raw nerve here, and I think that's what Donald Trump's all about here. I mean, he has these gaffes. He makes mistakes about immigration and a lot of other issues, but a lot of people don't seem to take it too seriously because of one important thing. He is likable to so many people. Likability is very important in presidential contests. Go ahead, David in New York.
Yeah, that's right. For one, it's always been a significant poll question, would you like to have a beer with this candidate? So that's true. Likability is significant. The other big factor with Donald Trump is he puts out so much content. He's so accessible that if he says one thing that's impolitic or perhaps highly offensive, it's still drowned out by 10,000 other words from this candidate, whether it's Twitter or, his daily visits on every network. So that also has something to do with the fact that, when he has these gaffes or frankly offensive comments, he's so accessible that the news cycle so quickly moves on. And obviously because of this modern age, news cycles are far quicker. And Donald Trump, so for all those factors, in the end, it comes down to the fact, as you're noting, Donald Trump is viewed as a truth talker. And however offensive he gets, at least they feel like he's speaking truth to power, and people are sick of Washington, and they'll take their imperfect demagogue or their imperfect hero over the, quote, perfect politicians.
Lionel, if I can go to you, if we can look at some of the presidential debates that he was involved in, if you look at Donald Trump's body language on the podium with the other candidates, he's almost running the show. He's giving the nod, you next. He's showing his presence, and people react to it. And I'm not advocating any candidate here. I want to make that clear to our viewers here, okay? But I'm looking at his body language. He seems to be so very much in charge, and I think people like that. People are reacting to it. Lionel, go ahead.
Oh, okay. First of all, let me say something right now. Since I can remember, I write my name in every election. I'm voting for none of these people. I am Lionel of the United States. I call myself Lotus for POTUS. Vote for me. Now, there was a show years ago in the United States called SCTV. There was a character who ran for office, and his motto should be Donald Trump's motto. And it says, sure, he's crazy, but what if he's right? He's not impolitic. He's not wrong. There are people who believe exactly what he says. Donald Trump lives in his own gravity. If you or I said what he said, we'd be either committed, indicted, or imprisoned.
Right,
but for some reason, in this weird world of this strange particle physics, this strange string theory, parallel universe, it works for him. He came out and he basically thumbed his nose at everybody. In addition, the GOP, the Republican Party, is fractionalized. Because up till now, remember, in 1856, at the first Republican National Convention in Philly, which is where the Democrats are going to have theirs, the first platform, they called them the twin pillars of barbarism, polygamy and slavery. Look where it's gone. Republicans have always had a prefix. They were always trying to explain who they were without going into a lot of history. But now, Donald Trump says, I'm not a member of the Tea Party. I'm not an evangelical Bible thumper. I don't kowtow to Wall Street. He actually dared say that I would speak with Mr. Putin and negotiate with China. He talks about everything from vaccines to the president's birth record. He talks about things which nobody has had the temerity,
let's clarify something. Can I
respond to this? Go ahead, jump in. That's the point.
My concern here is that this feeds what I'm hearing too much in conventional wisdom in the United States. Let's be clear. Nobody is adrift from history, okay? Yes, Donald Trump is an unprecedented, unusual candidate in American politics, but we also see characteristics of populists that have succeeded in American politics for years, for a century, from Huey Long to George Wallace. And so, all this said, the fact is that Donald Trump, yes, he's saying highly offensive things, but frankly, he gets away with it, as George Wallace did and as Huey Long did, because his supporters are not offended by what he's saying.
Exactly.
In the end, Donald Trump has only won a third of the Republican votes. It's just that he's won. Of course they agree with him, but in the end, Donald Trump will only go down if he offends those who stand behind him. And those who stand behind him, as you're noting, they like his strength. They like his stance on immigration. They like that he's taken on Washington. And frankly, to these voters, to these Republican voters, they have been voting for the suits for decades. And in their opinion, look where that's got them. So Donald Trump has simply come at the right time. The environment favored a populist, and he's great on television, and he's got some of the best qualities of populists in American history, and he's largely unstoppable in the primary for this reason.
David, let me ask you a question here. If we're looking at for sound bites here, it seems to me that he doesn't say it, but his empathy does. I feel your pain, and I think a lot of people react to that. I think he's really tearing a page from Bill Clinton. Is that I feel your pain, and there's a lot of anger out there. A lot of the policies of the establishment of both parties, when we look at trade and we look at immigration, foreign wars, the electorate has shown it's very tired of all three, and he comes out and says, I agree with you. I mean, that's why, again, on major issues, not the little gaffes, about the Ku Klux Klan or something like that, is distasteful as that is, he gets a pass. Go ahead, David. How do you react to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I feel your frustration. I mean, and Trump does embody the sort of the average man, the everyman. But in the end, the I feel your pain candidate doesn't always win in American politics. John Kerry polled better on I feel your pain than George W. Bush, but George W. Bush won in 2004. So I will, but this is a very unusual moment in American history. The establishment's historically unpopular. The parties are weaker than they've been in modernity. And here comes a populist who, where Washington is despised
Peter,
or disliked at historic levels, who's capturing that wave.
Okay, Lionel, do you think also because
Peter,
of
with all due
let me
respect,
ask you a quick question. Okay, I think also that's very, very important here is this concept in American culture is the underdog here, and when you have these major big names in the Republican Party, the great elders and all that, and they keep hammering away at him, I think a lot of people think that's unfair. If I have a vote, I should vote for whoever I want, and they see this establishment going against him, and I think that actually adds fuel to his cause. Go ahead, Lionel. Go ahead.
Peter, with all due respect to you and my esteemed guest here, or colleague here, I don't know who you're talking about. The common man, he's a billionaire who flies in on his own jet.
You're right.
He's a guy who walks around.
Actually,
he's a walk.
No.
This is his. We're looking at something, and we're trying to explain at a post hoc rationalization of why he's working.
No,
he's
but Lionel.
Yeah, but
with all due respect to our guest, David.
Listen,
I
FDR,
think
Franklin Roosevelt. Let me just clarify this idea for Americans,
exactly
for
what
our
you're going to say,
foreign audience.
David.
Franklin Roosevelt.
Go
I
ahead.
know we all know this. Franklin Roosevelt. We all know this. Franklin Roosevelt and John Kennedy were from some of the richest families in America. Were part of the elite, and that did not especially with FDR, that did not interfere with his populism.
Sure.
The point made at the beginning of this segment is key. He is a billionaire, but the fact is, he's also, if you turn off the sound in those debates, if you just watch his body language, if you listen to him talk, he has an everyman demeanor. However egotistical it is, he has an everyman demeanor. And as we learned with George W. Bush, the son of a president, the grandson of a senator, demeanor, persona matter more than lineage and cash in your wallet. In American politics, I would say.
But it does today. If you want to talk about body language, remember the classic Mussolini and the El Duce? That's Donald Trump. He has a bravado. He walks out on the stage and he owns it. The optics work. Look.
Lionel, David, I have to jump in here. We're going to go to a short break, and after that short break, we'll continue our discussion on the U.S. presidential election. Stay with RT. Welcome back to Crosstalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. To remind you, we're discussing the American presidential election. Okay, now we're joined by Brendan Andrews in Miami. He's a former U.S. Senate staff as well as director of Impact. Welcome to the program. Brendan, if I can go to you first here. I don't know how much you heard of the first segment here. We're talking about Donald Trump. Okay, let's talk about electability. Just about every single poll I can find, Hillary Clinton, if she ends up getting the nomination, and it's very likely she will beat Donald Trump in the general election in November. What's your thought?
Well, I think that the traditional understanding of electability has to be thrown out in 2016. We've seen Donald Trump being able to pull in new voters from all parts of the Republican Party. We've seen in the Republican primary, hundreds of thousands of more voters come out to vote in these early states. And so, yes, that's the polling now. However, I think Donald Trump will have a really good chance if he's elected. Now, I think there's questions as to whether or not we want Donald Trump to be the Republican nominee. However, in terms of electability, I think those things have to be thrown out at this point if we're looking at it in the traditional sense, because the traditional sense hasn't worked thus far.
Well, you're right. There's nothing really traditional about this one. I can't remember an election in my lifetime when it's been like this here. We have such challenges. We have an insurgency in both parties here. David, if I can go to you in New York, how electable is Donald Trump? Because, when you look at people that are going to the polls now, these are maybe they're not typical people. They're motivated politically. Not everybody is. A lot of people are very passive when it comes to the election process here. These are the people that are really moved by candidates here. Bernie Sanders as well, and the other party here. So, are we just looking at a segment of society that is very interested in Donald Trump and he doesn't have a general pull? Go ahead.
Well, yes. I mean, in the sense, we're looking at a plurality of a minority of the electorate, right? Republicans. But your previous guest has it right. In the end, we have Donald Trump. He, in this one sense, we just simply cannot use history as a clear predictor of the future. And the problem here is that Donald Trump, we don't know, could he pull 20% of Democrats? I'll tell you this. We do know that head-to-head polling at this stage in a presidential race is not predictive. If it was, Michael Dukakis would have been president in 1988.
Okay, good point.
What we also know is that Donald Trump is not a conventional candidate, and I mean, I think that we'll all probably agree on this point, and we should all be very humble in predicting a Hillary versus Trump election. I will tell you this, the Clintons would much rather face Cruz than Donald Trump, and they do not want to face Donald Trump, and frankly, they shouldn't want to.
Okay, that's very interesting. Lionel, you want to weigh in there? Because
Peter?
Go ahead. That's the point of the program. Go ahead.
Yes, Peter, there's one thing right now. Let's assume that, for those who don't know this, there are many investigations that are going on right now involving Mrs. Clinton and some alleged violations of law without going into specifics. If I'm Donald Trump and I look at the camera and I say to the camera, they told me that I could ever get this far, and they're telling you I can't get this far. If you're tired of war, if you're tired of Wall Street, if you're tired of warmongering, if you're tired of shills, if you're tired of people who are out there for themselves, who use you and your hope and your family as some type of a bumper sticker, then fine, you vote for them. But if you want something different, I'm the person. And I'm telling you right now, there is a sense of revolution.
Yeah.
There's one thing about the American public. Whenever you tell them they can't do something, or they're not supposed to do something, or they shouldn't do something, there's this sense of, oh, wait a minute, excuse me, we're different. And then, when you explain this cockamamie sense of how we elect people with electoral colleges, let me remind people of one thing. If you went to Times Square in New York, picked 1,000 people, and ask them to explain the Electoral College or how even the nomination process works, nobody could answer the question.
Lionel, we'll do that in another program, okay? We'll need more than 25 minutes to do it here. Brandon, if I go back to you in Miami, I mean, if you were advising Hillary Clinton right now, how would you advise her to take on Donald Trump?
Well, my first piece of advice would be, Hillary, you've got to find some way to inject some excitement into your campaign.
That's for sure.
One, broadly, but then also with millennials. Hillary Clinton lost the youth vote in every Super Tuesday state to Bernie Sanders. And if this is the person that's supposed to be carrying the party forward, turnout in Democratic primaries so far is down 20%. It's up 20% in Republican primaries. And so I think the first step has to be, one, finding a way to resonate with millennials that are now 31% of the electorate, the same percentage as baby boomers. And then the second thing is you've got to find a way to bring some excitement to your campaign, because Donald Trump has a long list of one-liners that he's going to pull out in the fall if he's the nominee, and she's not going to stand a chance.
Okay, David, let me go to David here, because I think
if I may, can I jump in here?
Please do, please do.
Can I jump in here on this point?
Because I think it's important. It's also important to talk about the insurgency in both parties with Bernie Sanders. Go ahead, David in New York. Go ahead.
I hear absolutely. Let's just presume it's a two-person race, okay? Let's presume it's the two front runners win. Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton. I promise you, Hillary Clinton will have no trouble rallying her base, because if there's one truism in American politics, it's that the antagonist of my friend is my antagonist. Let me clarify that. My point being, people vote against more than they vote for.
You bet.
2008 was an exception. And so they will, the minorities, the Democratic base, women, the liberal women and minorities in America, they will turn out against Donald Trump. Now, obviously, the big caveat that gives us all humility is that we don't know how much Donald Trump will either pull from the Democratic white working class, what's left of that base, and more so about whites who have stopped voting in recent presidential cycles. So that's why we have to be humble before this. But I promise you, if it's Trump versus Hillary will turn out that base, because they will be voting against Trump. They don't love
Peter,
Hillary, but that Democratic base despises Trump.
Lionel, jump in. Go ahead.
Yes. Here's what I would say if I'm Donald Trump. Bush, Clinton, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Clinton. What are we, a monarchy? What is this? I mean, are you talking about, if you want to see what Hillary Clinton is going to do, look what her husband did. That's number one. Let me also mention what Bernie Sanders did. We talk in this country about millennials, like they're from another planet, like they eat different things and breathe a different oxygen than we do, that they think differently. These millennials came out and loved this 74-year-old, hoary, white-haired, socialist, Brooklyn Jew atheist, and they loved it. And they're actually embracing, for the first time, actual precepts of what was New Deal Democratic policies. So you've got Trump, who is basically fractionalizing the GOP, but you also have had Bernie Sanders, who made for the first time Hillary Clinton at least pay lip service to those platforms which were historically and prototypically Democratic. Two huge changes.
Let me ask all three of you. I want to ask all three of you. I want to start with Brendan first. I mean, are we seeing in this election the fruition of the Occupy movement and the Tea Party? I mean, we're actually seeing the second generation of these two movements, because you have Bernie Sanders right there. He's very much speaking to people like students with heavy debt burdens and things like this, and really a sluggish economy where you're not going to get really well-paid jobs. And then you have Donald Trump. He's kind of cherry-picked the best and most effective elements of the Tea Party movement. And I'm going to ask Brandon first in Miami about that.
Yeah, so this has definitely been a long time coming. This populism that we've seen in 2012 and even in some respects in 2008 certainly isn't something new. And that populism is what's allowed a candidate like a Donald Trump and for that matter, a candidate like a Bernie Sanders to now rise to the top of the ticket in the Democratic and Republican parties. And so any candidate that wants to win, and I think it's not just nationwide. I think if candidates are running locally, if they're running statewide, any candidate that wants to win is going to have to tap into that. Yeah. One, because representatives of these groups are going to come to your events and disrupt them and make you say things if you refuse. But two, because that's the tenor of the American populace now. And I think the American understanding of what the problems are now sync with Occupy, sync with Black Lives Matter, sync with these other movements in a way that they don't, and don't sync with kind of the standard party platforms in a way. One of the other guests said the parties are the weakest that they've been in modernity, and I think that's true. And I don't see at this point either one of the parties, and maybe something will happen in July, but I don't see at this point either one of the parties making significant changes to their platforms that are going to reflect Occupy, that are going to reflect Black Lives Matter, and that are going to make the parties more relevant in the future. So it's going to be up to the individual candidates to tap into that if they want to win this year.
David, let's stay with Donald Trump here. I mean, I just find it, I don't think I can remember a time in my lifetime where the party establishment goes after their own frontrunner the way they have now. I mean, is it possible they could derail Trump?
It's highly unlikely. Right now, the best tactic that they're trying is that to effectively deny him a majority of delegates, get it to the convention, get it to a second vote, so he fails in the first vote of the convention to win them, to basically win the nomination. It goes to a second vote. But let's play that out. Really, the Republican establishment, a bunch of stiffs in suits who are politicians, denies the populist Republican the presidential nomination. That's going to go real well for Republicans. That makes Hillary Clinton president. I'm going to guess here. This is just from my gut. Because of the Supreme Court, because of the Scalia pass, because one of the justices passed, then that we could have 2 or 3 nominations in the next election. I suspect that conservatives and Republicans will get close to that contest and they will decide, you know what, as unpredictable as Trump is, we at least know his nominees are going to be more to our liking than Hillary Clinton's. And I think it's because of the Supreme Court that they will force some practicality and they will swallow the very bitter pill. And if Trump pulls this out, which everything says he will, I think all this talk about third parties and about going to second ballot to convention will become largely moot. But
okay, gentlemen,
I could be proven wrong.
Okay, on that point, gentlemen, we've run out of time here. Fascinating discussion. Many thanks to my guests in New York and in Miami. And thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time. And remember, Crosstalk rules. Science
I love your choices.